Hey guys, Disclater Magic here, and it's time to continue everybody's favorite series. You might have noticed that there's been a whole bunch of videos uploaded lately, all in a row, from the MTG Mistakes series. That is because ISIS teamed up with the Illuminati and kidnapped me. I'm currently chained to my desk, unfortunately, and they're forcing me to make YouTube videos because that makes sense logically. Just kidding. Although, if one of my neighbors keeps slamming their door repeatedly, making me start this recording over, somebody's gonna get chained to their desk. No, but seriously, send help. Send foil Lilianas. Okay. Everybody who gets the reference is gonna be like, oh my god, that's not very nice, Desolator. This is such a serious situation. She's seriously on drugs is what's going on, okay? Oh, I mean, allegedly, or possibly, or that's my opinion. Wait, what's that? She lives in a foreign country, you're saying it's really hard for her to sue me. Okay, yeah, she's on drugs. You don't gain 500,000 subs and have 100 billion trillion tweets at you asking if you're alright and then just like ignore it for 48 hours, okay? She's on drugs. Well, that was 62 seconds of completely wasted time for anybody who has no idea what I'm talking about and doesn't follow all the stupid news stories that happen on YouTube. So let's get right into the MTG Mistakes Part 6 video. Yeah, that reference is even funnier if you know I have like a really bad looking beard right now because I've been too lazy to shave. Anyway, it's time to talk about fighting. That's right, monster fighting. You guys really shouldn't be playing Pokemon Go because it promotes like, animal abuse and like dog fighting. Just kidding. We're talking about werewolf fighting primarily, I would assume. Now, if you back up quite a few blocks, monster fighting was huge. There was like a ton of fight cards, like Savage Punch, for example. Cons and Fate Reforged and even Dragons had a ton of force fighting. Well, people really liked the cards. They were really useful, kind of funny, very, evenly leveled. It was a very fair mechanic. So they brought it back and they made it cheaper and easier, which is awesome because creature removal is huge, and now it's primarily green, really. And green doesn't have a lot of creature removal. I mean, they got a lot of ambush. I mean, it's not that hard to remove a creature, but I think it's nice that they added force fighting, as I call it. I always call it force fighting because you're fighting the opponent, but you're forcing them to kind of participate, so thus force fighting. The number one prime example, which happens to be a common, which is fantastic for everybody, is Prey Upon. It only costs 1. That is it. Probably because they didn't add any kind of ferocious or a boost or any of that. Luckily, they didn't add a delirium boost to it, this specific card, I should say. So for 1 mana, it says target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. Now, you have to already know the rules about fighting to know what to do because it's not written on the card. And since it's not the most common mechanic in the world, a lot of people who haven't been playing for a while or just don't get way into the rules and rulings and mechanics, they just don't know how it works. So I thought, hey, why not? I mentioned it in the other video, I should definitely expand upon it in this video. I'll just go over the basic tenets of it. Let's say you have a 3-3 and a 2-2. Okay, your 3-3 fights their 2-2. You're choosing the targets. Obviously, you're going to make sure that you can kill it, except for certain circumstances I'll get into later. And, okay, you just killed it because it took 3 damage and then it has 2 toughness, it dies. That's, as basic as it gets. Now, here's the other thing. Let's say you have a 1-1 and you fight their 5-5. Okay, you deal your power to their toughness, they deal their power to your toughness, your creature dies, but until, I'd say end of turn, but it's actually cleanup phase, which I think is a sub-phase of the end step, or after it, I don't know, that's really not important compared to other phases. But anyway, the damage doesn't wear off until the end of turn. Whether it's your turn or their turn, doesn't matter. The end of the current turn, the damage is on them because they took combat damage. It's the same as during your first main phase hitting a creature with the lightning bolt. You're going to deal 3 damage to it, and that 3 damage does not go away until the end of turn. Now, the same applies to force fighting. So you might take advantage of your opponent not knowing this, which is kind of a dick move. Unless they're an experienced player, then they ought to know this, so leave it up to your own discretion, but it really just comes down to how badly do you want to win the game, because now if they take their 5-5 that took 1 damage and block your 4-4 that you swing with, their creature just died during combat phase. So let's say you force fought them during the first main phase, they took 1 damage, now they took 4 more damage during combat by blocking. Oops, they just died. And there's really a lot of people that think that damage wears off at the end of the phase as well as your mana pool emptying at the end of the phase, but that's just not how it works. So that's a little trick you can pull. I mean, it's kind of dirty. It's kind of like, oh, I'm exploiting the fact that you don't know the rules. Ha ha ha. I mean, it's not nice to new players, so don't be a dick. But if they're like 11 years old and you already caught them cheating 5 times in the match and they're generally being a dick, yeah, screw that little kid. Hit them with the little 1-2 punch combo, and I guarantee they will know how the mechanic works after that because they'll probably lose the game. Now, this next bit was in my notes. I have no idea where in the video to throw it in, so I'm just going to say it. If you somehow manage to get a creature to force fight itself, which I can't think of a way to do it, but apparently it's possible, it will be considered to be dealing damage to itself twice. So if it has lifelink, you just gained a buttload of life, probably. Just thought I'd throw that one in there because it's so unbelievably weird, but kind of makes sense, and it's kind of on par with 2 identical creatures using Soul Bond on each other, and then you get like exponential triggers. So let's move on to what happens when you force fight and your creature has what they call a static ability, or a keyword ability, I should say, because obviously it could have both. I'm totally not going to explain what those are. Basically, people call them creature properties, which is completely incorrect, but it makes sense. I'm, of course, talking about trample, death touch, lifelink, flying, all of those. Those are static abilities and keyword abilities. Okay, fine, I'll explain it. Keyword abilities are abilities that are basically the shortened replacement for a block of text, and a static ability is just an ability that's already referenced in the rules, so it just needs to be one word. That is a terrible and partially accurate explanation of what those two mean. But the point is, what happens when you force fight and you have trample? What happens when you force fight and you have death touch? Which ones are active, which ones aren't? Now, some people just assume that they're all active because you're fighting and it's exactly the same as combat. That is completely not true at all. Well, let's start off with the actual definition of fight. It's really quite simple. When 2 creatures fight, each deals damage equal to its power to the other. Simple as that. So if it has an ability on it, and the ability describes how combat damage works, because this is not considered combat damage, then that ability is irrelevant. But if it has an ability that references when the creature deals damage, then it does work, and it is considered in a fight. So let's hit a couple common ones as examples. I think I probably already mentioned this. Trample does not work because trample basically describes how combat damage can be assigned and how it works during combat phase, which it's not combat phase, it's not considered combat damage. Like I said, fight says you're just dealing the creature's power in damage to the other creature's toughness. Simple as that. So that's why obviously trample does absolutely nothing. Let's go to first strike and double strike, because obviously, as I hope you know, double strike implies first strike. Those 2 abilities describe when damage is done during combat. It's just chronologically when, and then double strike says, once during first strike phase, once during regular combat phase, and then first strike means just during first strike phase. Well, there is no first strike phase because you're not in combat, you're just fighting, you're just using the fight mechanic. And that's the one people screw up the most. If your creature has double strike or first strike, you're thinking, we're gonna fight and I'm gonna take him out because I've got first strike. No, you're not, because it's irrelevant, because you're just dealing the power to their toughness, and that's it. So double strike is not actually a description of the creature's power. I mean, you could think of it that way, but that's not really how it works. In fact, a 3/3 double striker still only has 3 power if you need to measure its power. It doesn't, it like effectively has 6 power, but not really. It only has 3 power. Now let's jump to one that is valid for fighting, Death Touch. Now Death Touch, the definition is something like any amount of damage done by this creature, and it doesn't say combat damage, it just says damage. Any amount of damage done by this creature is enough to be considered lethal. And then if a target gets hit by a non-zero amount of damage by a Death Touch creature, it is destroyed. So you're using the creature as a source to deal damage to another creature, Death Touch, boom, you kill it. Another good example is lifelink. The actual definition or description of it sucks, so I'm just going to go to the ruling that they made when they first invented it. Ruling number 1 basically is the ability causes life gain whenever a permanent with lifelink deals any damage, not just combat damage. That's like word for word the actual ruling about it. So they really spelled it out for you there because, like I said, fighting is not combat damage. So you would gain life if you deal damage with lifelink. And there's all kinds of crazy lifelink stuff out there. Like if you grant a creature lifelink and then it has an ability that says tap, this creature deals damage to opponent creature, you still gain life because it's still the creature dealing it, even though it's non-combat, and it's completely unrelated to its power. Little bonus tip for you there, but yeah, add lifelink to the list of abilities. That does work when you're fighting. Now, you're probably expecting me to go down the list of all abilities ever and say which ones do and don't work during fighting, even though it's really obvious now that I gave you the examples. Basically, if it does have to do with the creature either dealing damage or that creature's power, I guess, sort of, then it does work. But if it has to do with combat or combat damage or the combat step, then it doesn't work. And I'm also pretty sure I'm probably going to get one or two of these wrong, but you know what? I'm going to do it anyway. You know, because ISIS chained me to my desk and they told me I have to read the full list. So, Death Touch, yes, it works. Defender, no, irrelevant. Double Strike, completely irrelevant. Enchant, why is that even on the list? I'm going to skip some of these. First Strike, irrelevant. Flash, irrelevant. Flying, irrelevant. Haste, irrelevant. Hexproof, irrelevant. Indestructible, very, very relevant. It has to do with taking damage. Intimidate, I mean, come on, people, that has to do with blocking. Do I have to tell you that one? Any of the walk abilities, like Land Walk, Island Walk, any of those. Well, Land Walk does imply Island Walk. That's a long story. That's irrelevant with fighting, obviously. Lifelink, hey, totally relevant. Protection from anything, creatures, colors, whatever. Completely relevant. Has to do with dealing damage or taking damage. Reach is irrelevant. Shroud is irrelevant, although you wouldn't be able to target the creature with the spell in the first place. Trample is irrelevant. Vigilance is irrelevant because you're not tapping, by the way. Don't screw that up. You're not tapping when you fight. Banding. I have no idea how banding works, but I'm pretty sure it has something to do with during combat, so probably not. Rampage, I don't even know what that is. I've never even heard of that. Cumulative Upkeep, why is that on the list? Why am I even reading these? Flanking, I don't even know what that one does. Kicker, it's not even creature related, barely. Fear, that's just basically another version of Intimidate to a certain extent, so that one's not it. Morph, not really relevant. Oh my god, like none of these apply. This is so aggravating. Provoke, Storm, Affinity, Entwine, Modular, Sunburst, Bushido. Actually don't know what Bushido is. That might have something to do with combat. I have no idea. I don't remember. Ninjutsu, that's actually a pretty good example because, no, it doesn't work. Dude, there's some weird stuff like Haunt. I've never heard of that. Bloodthirst, I don't even know what that is. Graft, Recover, Ripple, I don't even know what those do. I am not qualified to read this list. Fortify and Frenzy, Gravestorm, Poisonous. You know, if you're so interested in these obscure freaking things, like, look it up your damn self. I have no idea. This list is getting worse as I go. Champion, I actually do know that one. Irrelevant. Changeling, it actually is kind of irrelevant depending upon how you look at it, but yeah, that's a long story. Here's three that I found. Persist, Wither, and Undying. Those absolutely do come into play, but only because they involve death and how damage is dealt. In fact, Force Fighting with Wither, which Infect implies Wither, by the way, that's a huge ability that a lot of people use in Modern if they're really, really smart. Exalted does not work because you're not actually attacking. Annihilator, once again, you're not actually attacking, so it doesn't work. Totem Armor, obviously in a roundabout way works, but that's like on death. I'm just going to skip all the on death ones. They're really obvious. Oh, here's one people actually give a crap about, finally. Menace. Menace does not matter. You can't, like, force the damage to somehow go through. Menace only refers to attacking. Oh, and by the way, they're not considered to be blocking. Now, the ability to Renown, I mean, it's debatable, but a lot of Renown effects are just, like, based on attacking or blocking or something like that. So, since there's actually no way to make Renown happen during a force fight, because there's no way to hit your opponent in any way, shape, or form, so in general, Renown is just disregarded, but +1/+1 counters from Renown are just counters, and counters are obviously counted when calculating the creature's power for a force fight, and toughness too as well. Ingest is equally irrelevant. There is no way to hit the opponent. Skulk is also irrelevant because it still just specifically refers to attacking and defending, or blocking, I should say. Keep in mind, you're not doing either of those. So you can see the pattern. This is really, really easy. It's really the end of the list of static abilities that I could possibly find that had anything to do with anything that you might be interested in. And now you know my complete lack of knowledge for really, really old mechanics. I've only been playing for like, I don't know, 3.5 years, something like that. So if you've been paying attention, as far as I recall, protection from whatever, indestructible, lifelink, and death touch are pretty much it, because they're the only ones that describe anything relevant to force fighting. Everything else is not considered except for anything that changes the power, you know, like prowess, maybe, you know, you drop some temporary boosts on it. Whenever they refer to the power, it's not printed on the card, it's the current power, and that's kind of a universal rule in the entire world of Magic. So hopefully now you'll put Prey Upon in your deck, start force fighting people, and force fight people's double strikers, good way to kill them, and they'll start complaining, and then you'll point to the rules and link them to this video, and then they'll watch the whole thing, and you'll hit the round limit, and it'll be a tie. So hopefully this video helped you out. It's another just evergreen, what do they call it, evergreen mechanic or something like that in the game, so fight is not going away anytime soon. So the sooner you know how it works, the sooner you can make an awesome deck where you start assassinating people's double strikers. And I'll see you guys next video. But seriously, send help. Send beef jerky, I'm almost out.